Hey, how's it going guys? Welcome back to the last video of our series, the 5-card population playbook. Today I'm going to be going through 4 ways that you can exploit the maniacs in your pool. Okay, let's jump into it. So first and foremost, we're going to learn not to fear the maniac. In my experience with one-to-one coaching, particularly when playing heads up, students definitely have real difficulty when facing maniacs over any other player type. So this isn't necessarily surprising, as given their playstyle, maniacs do manage to somehow put us in loads of seemingly very difficult spots. But with the correct strategy and exploits, you too can tame the maniac and capture a lot of EV in doing so. So in this case, the strategy has tamed our maniac into my dog Sunny, who, whilst very cute, is going to be very easy to exploit in heads up poker. Okay, so the first 2 exploits we are going to be looking at today are intertwined and connected to the same node. So versus maniacs, we should decrease our RFI frequency and also increase our 4-bet frequency. As always, when building our exploits, we always want to first work out how this spot operates in theory. So against a GTO small blind who folds like 84% of their range, calls 7% and 3-bets 8%, us as the button player are going to raise 47% of our overall range. We're going to fold 8% when we face a 3-bet, and we're also going to 4-bet 8% of this range. To make this a little bit more clear, I've basically highlighted a few hands that are going to be right on the line between raising and folding from the button versus a GTO small blind. So as you can see, the EV gained or lost by opening these hands is going to be very, very minimal. Now, on the other hand, when we node lock our button frequency and we have a maniac in the small blind, things are going to change a little bit. So in this example, our maniac in the small blind is only folding 50% of his range. He's going for the cold call with 30%, and he's 3-betting the top 20% of his range. So pretty standard maniac stats here. And basically what happens to our button frequency when we know this guy is in the small blind, we can see that our RFI range drops from 47% to 33%. We now fold 0% of hands to a 3-bet, and we also double our 4-bet range at 16%. So again, I've picked some kind of fringe hands to demonstrate where our new threshold for opening is going to lie with this maniac in the small blind. So now that we understand what kind of frequencies we want to be shooting for versus this player type, we basically raise tighter, we never fold to 3-bets, and we 4-bet double the number of hands. We do want to work out what kind of hands actually want to go into our new 4-bet range. So to help work out our ranges here, I've basically compared our response to a small blind 3-bet at 100 big blinds on the button in 6 max to our response to an 18% 3-bet in heads up at 75 big blinds. The reason that I've used the 75 big blind sim is because given that we're heads up, our 3 and 4-bet sizings are going to be slightly smaller, and therefore they're going to leave us with a similar SPR on the flop than they would at 100 big blinds in a 6 max game. So these ranges will be perfect, but I think it gives us a very good approximation of what hands we want to start including in our 4-bet range if we know that a maniac is going to be 3-betting us at a 20% clip. First up, are our aces combos, where we'll go from 4-betting 71% of them versus a GTO 3-bet range to 85% of them versus our maniac. So combos like ace, ace, king, 6-3, which would ordinarily be a flat button versus small blind, become slam dunk 4-bets versus the maniac. Same with ace, ace, 9, 7, 4. No nut suit, not a hand we usually want to be putting in a load of money with, but if our maniac is 3-betting us 20% of the time, these hands are definitely going to go in the 4-bet range. Next, we have our kings combos. So we're going from 0% in a GTO setting to 13% 4-bets versus our maniac. Very simply, we just want to pick like the best 13% of king-king combos. These are basically going to be double suited with an ace or double suited with really good connectivity and board coverage, like this king-king 10-8-9 double suited. In terms of combos that are not aces or kings, we're not going to be doing a huge amount of 4-betting, either in the GTO sim or in the node lock sim against the maniac. We basically just pick a few of the best double suited combos for board coverage that can dominate the maniac's 3-bet range on a bunch of different flops, and we can just use some of them. Okay, so just a couple of quick notes about this node. So as I said, these sims were node locked using the 4-card solver, and it's very possible that in practice we can actually open a little bit wider, as we can call 3-bets a little bit wider in 5-card, and therefore we don't get punished as heavily when we do face aggressive 3-bet ranges. Also, just a reminder that in these sims, the maniac is still going to be playing perfectly post-flop. So in practice, anyone calling 30% in the small blind and 3-betting 20% is probably going to be making a shitload of mistakes post-flop. So it's possible that we should actually still open a little bit wider than the sim suggests, just because we're going to be able to play in position versus an inferior player. So we definitely don't want to be raising as much as 47%, but we also probably don't want to be raising as low as a 33% frequency. Probably somewhere in the middle is where the correct frequency is going to lie against these guys. Okay, so third exploit for dealing with maniacs: attack high boards versus wide ranges. So always in 5-cards, but particularly versus players who deviate so widely from theory pre-flop, we always want to be thinking in terms of range versus range. How well does my pre-flop range connect with this board compared to my opponent's range? One of the biggest mistakes that I see people make over and over again is they play way too passively against maniacs, and this is a surefire way to lose money fast. So I think because they assume that maniacs make wild plays and are very aggressive when they have the initiative in plots, that the exploit to this is to play this kind of passive, defensive, Phil Hellmuth style of poker, and this definitely is not the approach you want to take. In certain cases, playing passively can work out against these guys, but in general, because maniacs have such wide pre-flop ranges, they often overfold in nodes of the tree that other players don't. So as a general rule, the wider their pre-flop range, the more they will miss the flop, and therefore the more fold equity we have by betting ourselves. Basically, the way to beat these guys is just to understand what spots that we really want to apply max pressure. So for example, on this King Queen 8 two-toned board, when we 3-bet the small blind versus a very tight EP open, so our opponent gets to the flop with a 17% range, he's really going to smash this flop with this range we're going to have aces that miss a lot, and therefore we want to just do a lot of checking on this board texture against a very tight range. But if we look at small blind versus button for the same board, we can see that now, because we are facing a much wider pre-flop range, and we ourselves have a wider range full of Broadway cards that connect with this board, now we actually get to do a lot more betting than we did versus this very tight EP range. And at the extreme end of this spectrum, when we are heads up and we face an 86% RFI range from the small blind, becoming an 80% range when they call our 3-bet in theory, they now have so many hands in their range that just cannot continue, even versus a pretty small bet on a board like this. And so now we get to bet close to our entire range to really attack this discrepancy in how many strong hands we have compared to the wide range of our opponent. So in some cases, in 6 max, we will absolutely be facing an 80% range when we come up against a maniac, and therefore we need to be able to attack high card boards much more aggressively than theory would like us to. And we need to apply the same logic, just in the opposite direction. So not only will maniacs connect less with high card boards given their wide range, they're also going to connect better with low card boards because of this. So on 7-4 deuce rainbow, when we 3-bet a tight open from EP in the small blind, we get to bet 80% of our entire range on this board because our opponent has a very condensed range of hands opening from EP and calling a 3-bet, and therefore aces is just going to be the absolute nuts on this board most of the time. And we can still see this to some extent when facing a 43% button range, because we'll still do a lot of betting, given that the buttons range is not going to have that many low cards, and therefore we're still going to have a pretty big advantage with our aces heavy range in the small blind here. However, when we know we are up against an 80% pre-flop range, suddenly our opponent is going to have a lot more sets, a lot more 2 pairs, a lot more pair and open-enders, a lot more wraps. And so now, against this wide range, we need to be extremely careful when constructing our C-bet range here. So in conclusion, the wider the maniac's pre-flop range, the more careful we want to be on low card boards, and the wider their pre-flop range, the more aggressive we want to be on these high card boards. The fourth and final collection of exploits we're going to explore today is how to play versus maniacs who have a high flop C-bet percentage. So firstly, we need to actually identify what type of maniac we're going to be up against, as this is going to affect our strategy pretty significantly. So for the purpose of our exploits, we're going to assume all the players that we face are going to have a 70% or higher flop C-bet frequency. So we have 3 types of maniacs. Type 1. The C-bet folder. Type 2, the C-bet caller. And type 3, the barreler. So let's begin with type 1. The C-bet folder. As we said, C-bets 70% or more of his entire range on the flop. He range bets boards he perceives as good boards for him, and so he's not like a total idiot just betting every single pot, but is definitely going to be C-betting way too many hands that have no business C-betting in a properly constructed range. And 3, he realizes that population underbluffs when they check raise. So again, this guy isn't a slouch. He has a rough idea of what's happening in the 5-card population, but he does not have a decent grasp of how he should be constructing his ranges. Okay, so how should we adjust our strategy versus a player with these tendencies? Well, as you might have guessed, we definitely want to start check raising more aggressively on the flop. And the way we're going to do this is we're basically going to select hands that are in theory close between calling and folding versus a c-bet. So, for example, on this ace jack 7 two-toned, facing a 70% or higher c-bet frequency, or possibly even a range bet on a board like this, given this player's tendencies, I've basically picked a few hands that are close between calling and folding in theory. But if we know that this player type just bets way too much garbage and will fold to a check raise and give it respect, then these hands make very, very good exploitative check raises. So hands like top and bottom with bad playability, top pair with a double gutter and the 10 of hearts blocker here, or like middle pair with the open ender and the backdoor flush draw. These are all combos that are slightly too weak to continue with a call in theory. But if we know that this player is just c-betting either their entire range or pretty close to it, then all these hands become very good check raise bluffs. Again, it's not about finding the perfect check raise bluff combos, it's just about realizing this player's tendencies are going to mean that we have way more fold equity than we should by going for a check raise with these kind of thin, close to call, close to fold combos in our range. Okay, second type of maniac. Again, this guy c-bets 70% on the flop, but he bets way too merged, not realizing that when he gets check raised, a lot of the hands that he's c-betting are going to be pushed to indifference or actually become quite badly losing defense. But he doesn't care, or know that he should be folding at least, and therefore he defends versus a check raise at a very high frequency. As an important side note, basically all player types except nits in the 5-card population bet a little bit too merged and therefore defend a little bit too wide versus check raises. So if we have a look here, GTO folds to check raises anywhere between 45% on unpaired flops to 52% on mono flops. However, population is significantly over defending versus check raise on unpaired flops and straight flops, defending at about an appropriate frequency, but probably with the wrong hands on paired flops and over folding to check raises slightly on monotone flops. Again, this is the result of population betting too many medium strength hands, like top 2 pair with no backup and bad combo draws that they incorrectly defend versus a check raise. So how should we adjust our strategy to exploit this? Well, firstly, we want to raise a little bit thinner for value and focus on check raises that just push a little bit more equity versus this mergy c-bet strategy of most of the population. So on ace jack 7 two-toned, for example, we want to start check raising hands like this middle set with a gut shot and a backdoor flush draw, or this ace king jack 8-5 with the jack high diamonds, basically because we know that the in position player is betting and calling too wide, so we can lower our threshold for getting value by check raising. Secondly, we want to take away the initiative of these high c-betters by donking more polar hands ourselves. So good candidates would be like hands that we were going to check raise bluff versus the type 1 maniac who overfolds versus check raises. So it was like a top and bottom pair with a naked gut shot and no blockers. to the flush draw, middle pair with an open-ender, top pair with an open-ender, and a flush draw blocker, these types of hands. These are the kind of combos that I would shove into my donking range against maniacs who c-bet too merged and then call check raises too wide as well. And finally, if we know that this player is just c-betting any time they have any sort of mate hand or any medium strength equity hand, when he does check back the flop, his range is going to be extremely weak and capped, meaning that when he checks back, we can probe turn at a super high frequency and realize loads and loads of fold equity. So a lot of these guys that I play heads up against who play like a 70 or 80 or even higher sometimes c-bet frequency on the flop, when they check back the flop, they fold to turn probes almost 100% of the time. This is a very, very valuable exploit against this player type and is maybe the most important exploit against this player type, at least when you're playing heads up, and this spot is going to come up over and over again. Okay, lastly, we have Maniac Type 3, the Barreler. So this type of player basically over bluffs in every node, particularly way over barreling on turns and rivers. So it's definitely the most difficult type of maniac to come up against, but we can indeed adjust our strategy to defeat these guys. So first of all, we basically want to give ourselves a better chance of withstanding multiple barrels post-flop by first tightening up our range pre-flop. So basically what I would do to find the kind of combos that we want to drop from our range is just go to PLO trainer, have the button open, wheel defend in the big blind, and we're basically just looking for kind of hands that do make a little bit of money calling versus a GTO range, but are probably not going to make money if we know that our opponent is just going to barrel us off every single hand. So probably hands like Ace, King, Jack, 3-3 with a King High suit is a good place to start. Ace, 10, 8, 6, 5, going to be a hand that's very difficult to withstand pressure on multiple runouts. Maybe Ace, Jack, 10, 3, 4 is the kind of same. 8, 6, 7, 8, 8, 7, 6, 5, 5, double suited, I feel like I would still call. Maybe hands like Jack, Jack, 9, 9, 3, we could drop. King, Queen, Jack, 8, 5, I would definitely drop. Not the type of hand that is going to withstand multiple barrels that often. Ace, Jack, 10, 9, deuce, definitely would drop this. So those are the kind of hands I'd start dropping against this player type. Just again, because we're not going to actually get to realize the equity of these hands if this guy's just betting every single time he opens the button, for example. Now, carrying on from this theme, if we know we're going to face multiple barrels a lot, then we want to defend on the flop a little bit tighter than we should in theory. This basically gives us, again, a more solid range to continue with on turn and river versus a very aggressive opponent. So maybe we want to start dropping hands like Queen, Jack, 10, 6, 7 on the flop here. Maybe hands like 10, 10, 9, 8, 4 with 10 high hearts. Basically hands that we're not going to have much chance to bluff with if we float the flop, if we know that our opponent is just going to barrel a load of turns and rivers. So what I would do to get a better idea for the kind of hands you want to drop from your range there is basically just go into PLO trainer and just take out the bottom few percent of your defending range versus a flop c-bet. Those are the hands that you can start dropping from your range. And do remember that our red line does not just come from being aggressive, it also comes from folding earlier on in hands where we know that we're probably going to have to fold later anyway. So this is the prime example of a spot where you can actually increase your red line just by being a little bit more disciplined on earlier streets when facing aggression. And finally, and perhaps most importantly of all, when we play against maniacs, we need to relax. So much of our win rate from these types of players is going to come from just playing a solid strategy pre-flop and post-flop and trying not to feel like we're getting run over and pushed around. So basically, the way that we crush these guys the most is just to let them keep putting in too much money, both with their bluffs and with their value. And eventually, the majority of the pots are going to start getting shipped our way. It's a mental game more than anything playing against these guys. Heads up, especially, I often find myself going a bit crazy, or at least I used to, when I can't make a hand to defend with versus these guys that just constantly triple barrel. But eventually, their strategy kind of sabotages themselves. And if we continue just playing our solid strategy against these guys, eventually we're just going to empty their account and they're going to tire themselves out. Okay, that's all for this series from me, guys. I really hope you found it useful, and please let me know down below if you have any questions or you think any of these exploits work or they don't work, or you have exploits of your own that you think I would like to know about. Please do either let me know down below or shoot me a message on Discord. Until the next video, good luck at the tables.